Guten Tag and welcome to PA Dutch 101. This is video 20 in our series, and we'll be dealing with the concept known as modal verbs, or sometimes also referred to as modal auxiliaries. This is a grammar-based video, so I'm not going to really be doing too much vocabulary. If you haven't seen our previous 19 videos, I would invite you to watch those and then come back and watch video 20. You'll have a much better understanding of what's going on if you see the previous videos. But that's it for that. Let's jump right into modal verbs. So, there are 7 modal verbs, or call them verbs for now, in Pennsylvania Dutch, which are used in conjunction with other verbs to express modality, and that's why they're called modal verbs. So the big thing is we have to remember that these usually don't stand alone. We use them in conjunction or with another verb, and once you see the list of modals, you'll realize that we do the exact same thing in English as well. They very rarely stand alone, okay? And the other big thing we have to remember when dealing with these is that all 7 of them are irregular. They don't follow the normal pattern for conjugation, and that's important. So these are ones that you're going to have to memorize how they conjugate. And if you have purchased the textbook that I and Josh Brown wrote, Modal Verbs, all of these are printed out in the book in the conjugation tables. So if you do have that resource, that could also be helpful. Otherwise, I do have them all conjugated out in the video. But you might have to pause the video to write them down for practice purposes and for memorizing purposes. Okay? But remember, they do not conjugate normally. Okay. Here are the first 3. So I have our table here with our modals. Down the left-hand column are our pronouns, ich, du, er, sie, es, mir, dir, sie, and then I have them broken out, plus I've given you the English. So the first one is brauche, 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 which means to need. Now the original spelling, B-R-A-U-C-H-E, and the infinitive, notice that for the most part this one's pretty good. It follows the rules, but it still falls into the category of a modal. So, ich brauch, du brauchst, er, sie und es braucht, mir brauche, dir braucht, sie brauche. That's an easy one. Now we get into the next one. Darfe, darfe, darfe. Darf is the modal we use, which means to be allowed to. Like, I'm allowed to go visit my friend, for example. Okay. Now, again, this one isn't too bad as far as changing. Ich darf, du darfst, er, sie, es darf. Notice there's no T on this guy here, so it's weird. Mir darfe, dir darft, sie darfe. Okay. And next one, kenne, K-E-N-N-E, kenne, kenne. Kenne means to be able to, or in English, can. Can I go to the movies? I am able to read Shakespeare, for example, something like that. So here's how that conjugates out. Notice the E in the infinitive changes to an A in the first 3 forms. So it goes from kenne to ich kann, du kannst, er, sie, es kann. Then the A changes back to an E for the last 3. Mir kenne, dir kennt, and sie kenne. So there's a really weird one. The vowel changes, so make note of that and be careful of that. The next 3. Mege, 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 M-E-E-G-E, and this means to like to. Notice that this changes spelling as well. In the ich form, the 2 E's change to 2 A's, and it goes to ich mag, ich mag, du magst, du magst, er, sie, es mag, mag. And then it changes back to its original spelling. Mir mähe, dir mägt, and sie mähe. Okay? Misse, to have to or must. Notice the I, M-I-S-S-E, changes to a U in the first three forms. So it goes from misse to ich muss, ich muss, du musst, du musst, sie und es, muss, muss. Then it changes back to its I. Mir misse, dir misst, and sie misse. Okay. Solle, to be supposed to, or shall. The solle, this one's a nice one. It doesn't change very much. It goes to ich soll, du sollst, sie und es soll, mir solle, dir sollt, and sie solle. Okay? So there's the next three. Mege, misse, and solle. And there's one more. Wolle. W-O-L-L-E. And that means to want. Wolle. Notice the O changes to an I in the first three forms. So it goes from wolle to ich will, du wit. That one changes quite a bit, so be careful. Du wit, sie und es will. And then it goes back to O. Mir wolle, dir wollt, and sie wolle. Out of all of them, this one changes the most, especially in that do form, so be careful of that. Wolle, to want something. Okay? Now, first note. Most Pennsylvania Dutch speakers, including myself, prefer to use gleiche, and we had that in a previous video, instead of mege. So both of them mean to like, both are fair game, but I'm telling you right now that most Pennsylvania Dutch speakers will use gleiche instead of mege. But it's good to know it anyway because you might see it if you're reading something, or you might hear it too. I'm not saying it isn't used at all, but we tend to use gleiche over mege. Okay. Now, here's the rule. Modals, I said at the beginning, not only conjugate irregularly, they also have their own set of rules. So when you are using one of those 7 modals, you need to use the following equation, and be careful. In a normal sentence, we're going to do subject, conjugated form of modal, what we just talked about, other stuff in the sentence, and your verb, whatever your other verb is, goes all the way to the end in the infinitive format, so in the E ending. Okay? So subject, modal, other stuff, verb. This is different from what we say in English. In English, our verb is usually right after our modal. I can go to the movies. In Dutch, we say I can to the movies go. So that's a little backwards. So we got to be careful of that. Our brains want us to put the verb here at first. You got to break that habit for Pennsylvania Dutch and put it all the way to the end. Okay? If you're going to ask a question, the only thing that changes is the subject and the modal flip positions. So it's going to go modal, subject, other stuff. The verb is still at the end. That's not going to change. Question mark. Okay? So from I can go to the movies to can I go to the movies. But in Dutch it would be can I to the movies go. So that's going to take some getting used to. Practice, practice, practice. Here's an example in Dutch. Ich kann Baseball spielen. Ich kann Baseball spielen. I can play baseball, but we know from our rule here, the play is at the end, so I can baseball play. Ich kann Baseball spielen. That will take getting used to. Turn a question. Oops, forgot a question mark here. Will Speck essen? Question mark. Will Speck essen? Will is to want. Speck is bacon. Essen, I think we've seen before or talked about. Essen means to eat. So, does he want to eat bacon? Or literally, wants he bacon to eat? It's almost like Yoda talking here, but that's the way you got to think a little bit. Modal first in the form of a question. Okay? You'll get used to it. It just takes a little bit. Alright. Let's practice some of this stuff. Good business eating. So, for the first couple here I have, and pause the video after I pose the question, answer it, and then hit play and you'll get your answer. Conjugate the modal for each sentence coming up. So here's the first one. I want to say, we want to use the modal wolle, to want. Our subject is do. Pause the video. Alright? If you do this correctly, do wit. W-I-T-T. Do wit. En machine kaufen. You want to buy a car. Du bent een machine kaufen. Okay. Here's our next one. This time we're using the modal misse, and our subject is ich. So, how do we conjugate it? Pause the video. You do it correctly. Misse changes to muss. Muss ich so viel du? Muss ich so viel du? Do I have to do so much, or must I do so much? Here's another one. This time our modal is kenne, to be able to or can. Our subject is Konrad, a man's name, so he. How do we conjugate kenne for Konrad? Pause it. You end up with der Konrad kann stark laufen. Der Konrad kann stark laufen. Laufen is our verb here, to run, or sometimes used as to walk. So Konrad can walk stark quickly or strongly. Okay? Der Konrad kann stark laufen. Okay? Now, this time, I want you to, I'm going to pose a question with the modals. You try and come up with an answer to them. For example, if I throw this question at you, was kannst du do? Was kannst du do? We know that was means what, kannst is the conjugated form of can, to be able to or can, do you, and do, D-U-H, is the verb to do. So, what can you do? Think of an answer to that. I know that all of my video viewers out there can do a lot of different things. Come up, pause the video, come up with an answer, and I'll show you what I got. I lied. I'm not going to show you what I got, because everybody's answer is going to be different. But if I were to answer this, was kann ich do, was kannst du do, I'd say, ich kann gut kochen. I can cook well, or I can cook good well. Ich kann gut kochen. Here's another question for you. Was brauchst du zu kaufen? Kaufen is to buy. We know that brauchst is to need. So, was brauchst du zu kaufen? What do you need to buy? Answer it. Come up with something. I need to buy a pen. Ich brauche ein Feder zu kaufen. Okay? Remember, watch your word order. Here's another question for you to think about and answer for. Wer sollst du besuchen? Wer sollst du besuchen? Wer means who. We covered that in our question word video. Sollst is our modal, to be supposed to or shall do, and besuche is to visit. So who shall you visit, or who are you supposed to visit? Ich soll meine Großeltern besuchen. Ich soll meine Großeltern besuchen. I should, or I'm supposed to visit my grandparents. You come up with your own answer though. Okay? Here we're using the modal nicht, but remember I said you could also use gleich. This is a throwback to one of our previous videos. We've already answered a question very similar to this. Was möchtest oder was gleichst du zu do? What do you like to do? In the end, the answers are limitless. I mean, there's certain things you like to do. Be able to say that in Pennsylvania Dutch. Look up the vocabulary word for whatever you like to do. Maybe you like to jog. Well, tell me that. Okay? Do Pennsylvania Dutch and use the modal. Alright? So, here's some more. Was kannst du do? Was kannst du do? What can you do? Maybe you have a skill or an ability that some people don't have. Maybe you're a really good drawer. Say that. I can draw. So, just use the modal. Don't forget verb placement. Here's an example I have. Ich kann die Banjo spielen. Ich kann die Banjo spielen. I can play the banjo, for example. Was brauchst du zu kaufen? I have this answer. Ich brauche ein neuer Hut zu kaufen. I need to buy a new hat, a Hut. Ich brauche ein neuer Hut zu kaufen. Notice verbs at the end, where we need it to be. Wer sollst du besuchen? These are the same questions I threw at you before, but now I'm actually showing you my answers. Ich soll meine Großeltern besuchen. Ich soll meine Großeltern besuchen. Und was magst du gleich zu tun? What do you like to do? Ich mag oder gleich Motorcycle zu fahren. Ich gleich oder ich mag Motorcycle zu fahren. I like to drive motorcycle. Okay. So there are some answers to those questions that we posed earlier. The big thing is getting used to having your modal second, conjugating it properly, and throwing that verb at the end. That takes getting used to, but practice, practice, practice. Okay? So, this video covered modals. Remember, they're irregular. They don't conjugate normally. A lot of times they actually change their spellings. They don't get the normal endings. And the big rule we have to remember is that when using them, whatever your verb is in the sentence has to go all the way to the end. Get into that habit. So there's modals in a nutshell, modal verbs, modal auxiliaries. Remember, if you ever have questions, complaints, concerns, or ideas, please feel free to email me at busterpa@yahoo.com. Otherwise, bis die nächste Video. Macht's gut und schwätzt Deutsch.